everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today we're going to be talking about unhealthy motivations behind submission, as well as how some subs might be manipulating their doms in their relationships. Or maybe not. We're going to talk about it. So this is part of an unofficial series on my channel where we talk about the not so pretty parts of power exchange, the conversations people don't normally like to have about how this isn't all sunshine and roses. And I have a few related videos that cover similar areas to this that I think together with this video make for a really nice holistic conversation. So I have one where I talked about the toxic side of submission, and I have another where I talked about how submission is not a substitute for adulthood. That later one is an older video. I think it's an oldie but a goodie, though I haven't watched it in a while, so please be warned about that. And essentially why I want to talk about this today is because one of you all reached out to me and you shared a social media post you had been seeing making the rounds, and you wanted to know my thoughts about it. Did I agree, disagree? What is my general take on motivations behind submission? And I think this is a really good subject because we do spend a lot of time on this channel talking about why people enjoy different kinks, but we don't necessarily talk about the darker side of that. We tend to stay pretty positive, but not all motivations are made equally. But before we get into all that, let's go ahead and read this post because we are going to be using it as a springboard for a larger conversation. So the post starts out by saying, "Truth bomb, offering to serve so that you can feel chosen and worthy, so that you can gain a sense of belonging, so that you can obtain connection in return, so that you can lessen your risk of rejection, so that you can prove your value to yourself, so that you can placate feelings of insecurity, so that you can win over a dominant you desire, is manipulation." Truth bomb dropped. And this is totally an aside, but there's something about the energy of this post that really reminds me of the alpha male podcaster genre. Like, I would expect this to be along the lines of uncomfortable truths women don't want to hear about how men think about them, or something like that. I don't know. And I think with this post, I do want to say off the bat that I could be completely misinterpreting what the original creator here is trying to say. I'm going off of my own interpretation. That is not necessarily what was meant. I am assuming that by offering to serve, what they are meaning is getting into a DS relationship or trying to be a submissive, not just high protocol service, but submission in a more general way. Could totally not be the case and could be totally wrong by what is meant or intended by this post. But we are using it more as a springboard. We're not really gonna deeply analyze every single word of this, so stick with me. I think, first of all, what I want to say before we get into more about my thoughts with the particular points is that I don't think there is one universal correct motivator for being a submissive. I don't even know what that would look like if it was an actual thing, because I have heard so many stories about why people enjoy being submissive. I know people that are submissive because they feel like it is a true expression of who they really are on the inside, that they are only happy in DS relationships, and getting to be a submissive is who they are on a deep personal level. I know other people for whom submission is not really so much a lifestyle thing, it is more of a bedroom thing, where it is about the fun and the enjoyment and because it's hot, but it's not necessarily deeply complicated on like an intrapersonal psychological level. There are people that are motivated towards submission for reasons like they don't think they're good enough for anything else, or because they have really low self-esteem and they want somebody to reinforce that for them, that they should have low self-esteem, or because they want to harm by proxy, or because they want to try and escape responsibility in some fashion. But I don't necessarily think that is universal, and it's typically more complicated than that. I don't think that always means manipulation is taking place. I think it's much more likely to be people are not having the full information about themselves first before getting into a relationship. They don't disclose that, and it becomes a compatibility issue. I can totally see it be the case that somebody who is a dominant, that is that way because that is truly who they are in their soul, might feel manipulated if they get into a relationship where the person is only doing it because it's like a hot role play for them. And that level of commitment or personal importance might feel like, hey, I'm being tricked into being in this relationship and I don't think my partner is really submissive. But it's hard to make blanket statements about that because, yes, there are some doms that would be totally incompatible with that, but there are other doms where they're also the same way and they do it for hot role play fun and they're not into it because it's a deep part of who they are. And I think we have to make room for all of those different motivations existing at the same time. But at the same time, I do want to recognize that yes, submissives are capable of manipulating dominant people. I think sometimes in our community, we get very pigeonholed into the idea that problems in relationships only go one way, where we have to be worried about doms doing bad things to S-types, and S-types, because of the power structure, can't do bad things to dominants. And I don't think that is the case. I think it can look differently, but it's not that it doesn't happen at all. I think this is why we have terms like topping from the bottom. I think these days that term has been completely overused and reduced down to basically mean a bottom that has opinions or a bottom that's too bossy. But when you look at, I think, the original intention for why people wanted to say that, it was a way of signaling, hey, this is a bottom that's going outside of the pre-negotiated boundaries of our dynamic, of our relationship, of the scene, and I don't appreciate that. I don't like that. So yes, I do think that subs can hurt, manipulate, do terrible things to their dominant partners, and I think that if we pretend that subs are all these universally incapable, ineffectual doormats, we are going to overlook a lot of problems in this community. But does that mean I think everything on this list is necessarily manipulation? I don't think so. So when I look at things like wanting to be submissive because you want to be chosen and feel worthy, or because you want to have a sense of belonging, I go, wait, how is that manipulation? And also, why is that a bad thing? Because from my perspective, that's why the kink community is a community. It's not just individual people having individual relationships. And please forgive me for what I am about to do, but I am sort of about to invoke back in my day, but not really back in my day, but in the ye olde so-called old guard times, this was something I think was a pretty well-known factor of why people got into BDSM or leather spaces, because it wasn't just about a personal drive towards I want to be with this person to selflessly serve them and no one else, but because there was that sense of community and chosen family and being protected and togetherness and community support. That was a really important backbone of what eventually became the modern BDSM community. Because yeah, when you're living in a society that is very likely, if not already has, rejected you, othered you, told you you are defective or broken or wrong, you might want to have some sense of togetherness and community and bonding and support and all of that other good stuff. Now, I don't think this post is necessarily saying you can't be a true submissive if you think any of these things, or if any of these things are part of your motivation towards submission, but it's getting dangerously close to that, and I could see some people using a post like this to tell newer subs, hey, you can't really be a true submissive if you want to have a sense of belonging, or you want to feel worthy. The only way you can be worthy of being my true submissive is if you do XYZ thing instead, or if you prove your selflessness in this way. And I don't understand the logical follow through on how wanting to feel worthy could make someone not genuinely be submissive. Like, what is the end point of that? What would that behavior look like in somebody who is trying to manipulate their dominant partner? Because I genuinely can't think of it. And there are a couple of other points in here that I don't fully understand, and I would love to hear what other people think about these. I think the main one for me is, if you are offering to serve because you want to win over a dominant that you desire. And I think with this one, the way I could read that makes the most sense is when the person is only offering to be submissive and has no intention of following through on that in order to get someone. Like somebody who is maybe even entirely vanilla, that has a crush on somebody they know is into BDSM, and then pretends to be into BDSM to trick them into a relationship they don't really want to be in because they think the person's hot, or somebody who pretends to be a submissive when they're really a bottom because they want to be play partners with someone. But even then, is that a super common problem? I can't think of any examples off of the top of my head. I think another way of looking at this, that was sort of my first instinct reading it, is, wait, are you saying that subs aren't supposed to approach doms that they like because if that's how a DS relationship starts, it could be manipulation? And once again, forgive me because I'm about to invoke the old guard once more, but back in ye olde times, the typical way that people would start a DS relationship was by an S-type or a wannabe S-type approaching a potential D-type with a letter of petition, basically a cover letter where you would outline, this is what I bring to the table, this is what I want, this is why I want to serve you, what do you think? And it was a way for S-types to communicate who they wanted to be in a relationship with, and then the D-type would take it from there. So is it a form of manipulation to communicate to a dom that you like them and want to submit to them? Or I am, again, not really, I think, fully seeing the entire point here maybe, and I think when you are looking at this from a particular angle, it is very possible to misconstrue and take this to mean what I think it might potentially mean, which is, if you are a submissive, if you approach a dom and want to submit to them because you are into them romantically or otherwise, that is a form of manipulation. And I don't think that is a healthy message to be sending people. But all of that being said, I do think there are some motivations behind wanting to be a submissive that are worth looking into further. And I don't want to give a hard and fast healthy versus unhealthy dichotomy here, because I think that almost everything exists on a spectrum, and I think that sometimes it's going to be acceptable and sometimes it won't, and it'll totally be up to the individual people entering into the DS relationship to decide that. I think what is a better way of looking at this is not really healthy versus unhealthy, but how aware of it you are, how you think it might affect your ability to have a DS relationship, and reflecting in order to decide whether or not you want to get some outside help first before getting into BDSM. So number one, the first thing I see that I think can be thought of in this way as potentially maybe not being a great motivation without some further introspection first is when you want to be a submissive because you want to avoid adult responsibilities or because you want to make your life easier. And I think, again, this one very much is on a spectrum where, yeah, if you want to be a submissive for other reasons and also you're really crap at time management and you want somebody to come in and help you organize your day, your schedule, your life, whatever, I think that can be a healthy thing. And I think on the other end of the spectrum, there are people that are drawn towards submission because of a misconception about submissives, where they think that all submissives are brainless doormats, where they just blindly do whatever the dom says to do, and they have no authority, no agency, no responsibility, no accountability, and they just basically don't have to worry about thinking about anything or doing anything because the dom is going to do everything for them in their life, from their taxes to deciding what they eat, what they wear, if they go to work, how long they're at work. Just their entire life down the list is controlled by that person, not as a negotiated thing, but as an inherent part of being a submissive. And this by itself is a complicated conversation, and I don't know if I'm doing the best job of talking about it right now, but essentially you have to be aware of when you're getting into BDSM and you're getting into a DS relationship. Why am I doing this? Why am I into it? And how much burden am I placing on my partner that I'm just going to assume is going to happen without having a conversation about it first? And I do know lots of people that when they are in DS relationships, they get a lot of support in this direction, but there's a line between getting help and completely having all of your responsibility, agency, and accountability taken away from you, and that you are no longer expected to do some of the basic things that most people would do in a relationship, even in a DS relationship. If you think that getting into a DS relationship will be a shortcut that will make your life easier and completely remove all of your responsibility towards yourself and put it on somebody else, that's worth thinking about more before you actually get into a DS relationship. My second example is going to be submissives that are motivated towards submission for entirely selfish reasons and do not think about the dominant partner at all in the equation. You know, the sort of subs where they go, oh yeah, I want to do this, 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 and this, and they don't ever stop and ask, like, what do you want to do? What are you into? Why are you a dominant? They have this misconception that all dominants like to do basically everything under the BDSM umbrella, and that the reason why we have limits is to keep subs and bottoms protected from the big, mean, scary dom. So if they didn't have those limits, would do literally anything and everything to that person, which is not the case. Everyone can have boundaries, limits, preferences, desires, motivations, and yes, not every dom is going to be into every single kink. I see this especially online with male subs approaching female dominants. Like, every femdom is going to be into every single kink on their list, and I think if they press the right combination of buttons in a conversation, the kink they want is going to pop out. Like, it's not how it works. It's a mutual process. And so I think it is worth reflecting and thinking about, okay, I want to do BDSM. Am I thinking about my partner as a whole other complicated person, or am I thinking about them as a kink gumball machine, which I do think is relatively easy to fix as far as this list is concerned, if you can remember that the other people you're doing kink with are whole other people. It is going to be a much richer and better experience having a DS relationship. Now, moving on to my third example. This one is very closely tied to the first example. This is people who are motivated towards submission because they don't think they are worthy of anything else, and the only way they will find love or companionship is by throwing themselves at somebody's feet and going, please, master, take me in. And I feel really bad because having low self-esteem or self-worth issues is a very common problem. At the same time, you can't have that be the only reason you are being a submissive, and I think it would be very hurtful for a lot of dominant partners if they find out that the only reason their sub is with them is because they don't think they are good enough for another relationship, because on some level this is communicating, I think that BDSM is the bottom of the barrel, and the only reason I am doing this is because I am not good enough to have a real vanilla egalitarian relationship, and I have to settle for this. That's not a good thing for a dominant to hear. That is not a nice, mutually enjoyable place to be in, because DS should be something that both people find fulfilling, not just something they're tolerating because they don't think they're good enough for something else. Now, my next example is potentially a little bit controversial, and that would be people who are motivated towards submission because they believe their gender makes them inherently submissive. And I have seen this on both sides. It tends to be people that are female supremacists or male supremacists, and it's sort of interesting they both coexist because how can both be true at the same time? And there are people that do this from a more consensual roleplay angle, but a lot of people will say, well, I'm a submissive because women are inherently inferior to men and our place is to submit. And I don't want to yuck anybody's yum or tell anybody they can't really be a submissive, but when you are getting into a DS relationship, because you inherently believe your gender makes you submissive, and therefore you are already down here and your partner is up here, that makes meaningful negotiation in a relationship very difficult, because you're not necessarily going to advocate for yourself the same way you would if you realized that you were equals and you were deciding the terms under which you would consciously decide to give up power and authority, instead of it being something true about your gender that you already are doing but are agreeing to do in a relationship or something like that. And finally, my fifth example is people that pursue submission because they think it will be a way to find a permanent BDSM relationship or a permanent relationship at all where they can no longer be abandoned. And this is interesting because we don't necessarily have a lot of research about this, but from what I have seen, BDSM and DS relationships in particular do not last any longer than vanilla ones. In fact, oftentimes they are shorter on average than vanilla relationships because of the heightened level of communication and compatibility required in order to be able to pursue something like this. And so I am sorry to burst anybody's bubble. I know from the imagery of collars and being together forever and the deep bonding, you might assume that BDSM or DS is a really, really good way to find somebody who will never truly leave you, because if you are willing to get naked and have them flog you or brand you or collar you, they couldn't possibly leave you, right? That would be horrible. Reality is, though, BDSM relationships end all the dang time, and none of that is an insurance against facing rejection. And if you are very afraid of experiencing rejection or being left, I think that is something to work on before pursuing DS, because once again, if you are getting into a DS relationship and you are coming in on this back foot where you don't want to be rejected, you might be more likely to accept things you wouldn't otherwise accept or tolerate in a relationship because, but I don't want them to leave me. I don't want to break up. I'll never find anyone like this. And that can end in a very unhealthy place. Now, again, to be clear, none of these things are a hard no, red flag, do not go past go, do not collect $200 scenarios. They are simply things to be aware of in yourself in the process of introspection that I think are worthy of further analysis and being conscious about if you choose to pursue a DS relationship. And this really just shows why that is so important for pursuing BDSM, for pursuing a power exchange, because if you don't know this about yourself, you cannot communicate that to a partner. And some dominants are going to, like I already said, find out that their partner is only with them because they don't feel worthy of anything better and be very deeply offended by that. Other people, though, they might hear that. They might hear somebody that they want to pursue a relationship with has insecurity issues, trust issues, boundary issues, and they might go, hey, I want to be able to help you with this, because a lot of dominants get a lot out of helping people become better, improving who they are, helping them be better at the end of the relationship than they were at the beginning, especially soft, gentle dom, caregiver types. That is a really big motivator for some dominants, and I don't want to tell them they're not really a dom because they would want to pursue a submissive that wants to feel accepted, or that their sub isn't a true submissive because of whatever thing maybe is affecting them. Like, I am not here to police anybody's motivation into what their kink is or why they're doing it. I just want people to be able to talk about it with themselves and then talk about it with other people. So going into the relationship, you can have a game plan for being able to deal with that. You can go into a relationship saying, hey, I'm new to BDSM. I really want to try these things. I would really love to have a power exchange relationship. I have some issues with XYZ I want to work on. Can you help me with that? And you leave it up to having a conversation about that, not sneaking it in there. Like, if you say it, it's going to ruin everything. The one true way to ruin a relationship, kink, vanilla, or otherwise, is to conceal parts of yourself or parts of why you want to be in that relationship from the other person. Honesty will almost always get you better results. And at the end of the day, it's not our job to police other people's experience in BDSM. It is not our job to say, hey, your DS relationship over there, your motivations aren't good enough, you need to rethink this, or your motivations are actually manipulation, you don't even realize you're manipulating your partner. Like, how awful would that be if we just said that to people that, well, I see you and your dom over there, and I heard that you're into this because you want to feel accepted, and don't you know it's manipulation? That would be such an awful thing to say to somebody out of nowhere. And I do know lots of people that have DS relationships where if you looked at it from the outside, a lot of people, maybe even most people, would say, oh, why are they doing that? That's really bizarre. That seems unhealthy, or there's no way that's consensual, even though it totally is. And it's not any of our freaking beeswax, okay? We are not the people in that relationship. We do not get to decide if people's motivations for kink are good enough or not. That is, once again, I'm going to say it one more time, up to the people in the relationship. We can have standards for ourselves. We can have things we don't want to see in our partners or would want to see in our partners. All of that is totally fine. However, externalizing that, generalizing that, saying this has to be the case for anyone doing kink, not just with me, that is where it becomes a problem. And there's a sentiment with a lot of posts like this where it comes off like the only true way of doing power exchange is if you were doing it because you want to give yourself to somebody else for entirely selfless reasons and you get nothing in return. And that is some people's BDSM, but certainly not most of them, I would be pretty comfortable saying. So, in summary, finally, that's basically what I have to say. Anyways, I would love to know what you all think about this in a comment down below. What are your motivations for being a submissive? Should I do another video where I talk about dominant motivations? Did I miss any of your personal motivations? Please, again, let me know in a comment down below. If you are new around here, if you're not subscribed already, please do, because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related subjects. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do this with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.